This week's Torah portion, PINKHUS, is the culmination of an event that was a tragic end to the sojourn in the 40 years in the desert. While Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, was negotiating with the Moabites as to the terms of how they could go through their land, or at least be dealt with in giving them the necessary supplies so that they can continue on their trek into entering the Holy Land, the Moabite king fulfilled the counsel of Bilam, which was to attract young Jewish, young Israelite boys from the various camps, at the edge of the camps, to the shuk, to the marketplaces. And in the marketplaces, there would be music, there would be all kinds of attractive items that would draw people closer, and finally, to draw the young people into acts of immorality, and, if possible, to get them to worship idols in the process. These ruses were successful. Moshe was diverted long enough so that people who wanted to see what was available, what they could purchase, whether there was some things that they could enjoy and then look at, went into the marketplace, and in the marketplace were drawn into the places of young women, attractive women, brought the young men and some older men into sinning, and in fact convinced many thousands of them to worship idols. This had an immediate result. God started a plague amongst the people of Israel. Inquiring what happened when Moshe found out about it, he was told exactly what was going on at the edge of the camp, and told in no uncertain terms that unless the perpetrators would be tried, those who served the idol would be tried, and those who were guilty of capital punishment would be killed, then the plague would continue. So Moshe immediately harnessed all of the judges of Israel to come and to capture the men and the older ones and the younger ones who were engaged in this idolatrous orgy, and to punish them appropriately. Tens of thousands of the tribe of Shimon were involved. Apparently, they knew where the weakest parts of Israel were. These were in the camp of Reuben, and primarily from the Shimonites. The reason why Reuben didn't involve himself so readily was because the Reubenites had been burned in the revolution of Korach. And so they were not ready to do anything deviant. But the tribe of Shimon felt that they hadn't gotten involved in the revolution of Korach or of the spies, and as such they were immune to any of Moshe Rabbeinu's wrath. After all, immoral behavior with a Gentile woman is prohibited only by the rabbis. At that time, there was no such prohibition. There was no need for such a prohibition. The people of Israel were exceptionally moral, but there was nothing on the books that prohibited this. When they found out that they were going to be charged with idol worship, and many of them stood to lose their lives because they were warned by witnesses, well, they came to their leader, Zimri ben Salu, who according to the Medrash might have been the first tribal leader of Shimon, Shlumiel. And as great as he was convinced by them that he had to do something radical to protect them. And so he thought, to prove that there was nothing wrong what the young men had done, he pulled a Midianite woman before Moshe Rabbeinu in the high courts and asked, what's the prohibition against this? And if there is no prohibition against this, why would you judge people and judge them to death? And to make his point even further, he took the Midianite woman into a private home before all of them to show his disdain for Moses' rulings. At that very moment, Pinchas saw what was going on, saw the destruction, saw the plague, saw also, didn't just see what was going on, he saw the future. If allowed to take place, this example of a leader of Israel would completely demoralize the entire youth. For you see, young people learn bad habits from older people. The greater and more important an older person is, the more careful he or she must be in their behavior. For children learn, and young people learn from their example, bad or good. And so he saw the results, how God had been angered, how there was this tremendous plague, and all of Israel were going to be killed by this plague. And worse, the plague of immorality would spread among the entire youth. So he went after Zimri into his little lair and proceeded to take Zimri out with his Midianite woman.